and welcome to Telewizja Republika. When Iranian proxies attacked Tower 22, that looks like this, the whole world was wondering what is the price that Iran is going to pay for the death of 3 US servicemen, 3 people that died from a direct attack of drone politically controlled by Iran, state that challenges United States for a very long time. This time, the US military base was attacked. The fact that this military base was technically located in Jordan, a state that is a relatively safe place for Westerners in Middle East and for US from various reasons, brought serious questions. However, it took us a long time to wait for American response. The official claims of US were, we are going to reply in the time and place that we will choose. When those people who died in this attack came back to the United States, American planes, bombers traveled to the Middle East to hit targets pointed by US. Next day, also, United Kingdom attacked other targets of other militias and proxies connected to Iran. But the thing is that Iran itself wasn't harmed in any way. To people who write and help us analyze the world geopolitics, Mark Toth and Jonathan Sweet in this text claim that what we see right now is actually an official war that Iran is waging against the United States. The problem is that the United States doesn't want to admit that this is exactly what is going on. The retaliatory attacks against the proxies makes only proxies suffer. No Revolutionary Guards were targeted and killed by US in those attacks. Actually, the same two authors a couple of weeks ago, and we discussed it on our program, argued that US needs to hit Houthis in Yemen as they were targeting Western vessels traveling through the Red Sea. Well, actually, this is the thing that happened right now when United Kingdom hit those targets after hitting Tower 22 by the Iranian proxies, but it looks like we are on a different stage of the same process. As always, and as we argue in our programs, those front lines, those wars are interconnected. Russia is waging war technically against Ukraine, but in a way it challenges the geopolitical order of the world we live in. Exactly the same thing is happening in the Middle East because of Iran activity. And no matter if we are talking about the Houthis attacking ships or Hamas killing people in Israel, this is the same war as the same war is waged by China, the most powerful of those states. States that compose a kind of new axis of challenging US as a global security controller. The thing is that the attacks that we are witnessing and the responses of US and its allies right now doesn't seem to stop those who deliberately target not only allies of United States, but after attack on Tower 22, also US infrastructure in the global geopolitical choke points. You can join us on rachoń.com, that's our website and that's our Substack. You can leave us your email here, as we will try to send you a daily dose of reports from the front lines of the war that we are watching every day as Western civilization is under attack. My name is Michał Rachoń, this is Rachoń, and we roll in.
Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go!
And tonight, Mark Toth, co-author of this text, is again on TV Republika. Mark, great to see you again and great to read again an eye-opening article this time for The Hill. You and Jonathan Sweet argue that actually we as a West, US as a state, we are at war with Iran. It's not that we are expecting this to be a war. This is an active war. At least that's what comes out in the conclusion that I read from your article. So what's your take on the situation between U.S. and Iran right now?
Michael, good to be back on TV Republika. Yeah, John and I do argue that Iran is at war with us. The United States, however, is doing its best to either fool itself, deceive itself, pretend otherwise, that we're not at war with Iran. The recent actions of the Biden administration in terms of responding to the deaths, and I think their names bear repeating because they're the men that lost, and women, a woman that lost their lives, William Rivers, Kennedy Sanders, Brianna Moffett at Tower 22 in Jordan. They paid the price for this war, and the Biden administration's response so far has been to try and argue that there's nothing much to see here. We'll hit back hard. We'll call it performative art. We'll call it kabuki theater, but it's anything but a real needed kind of response that John and I at least are looking for to ultimately deter and to stop Iran's war against the United States.
Last time we talked, and in one of your previous articles, you were writing about the necessity of hitting back Houthis' position in Yemen, that those attacks on Western vessels traveling through the Red Sea need to be answered. Well, now we are in a completely different situation. Those attacks escalated, and different Iran proxies hit directly U.S. military base. And we've heard and we've seen the reports about retaliatory attacks of U.S. I understand that your opinion, your and Jonathan Sweet's opinion, is that those counterattacks, those air attacks are not sufficient. Why?
On multiple levels. One, for your viewers, I think it's important for them to understand Iran practices, in effect, what is known as a forward defensive strategy. So they pushed out through the IRGC, sometimes known as Quds, but basically the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, of all of these militia groups that are in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, as well as, most recently everyone's hearing about Hamas in the Gaza Strip. They've got this forward defense that's actually fighting their war for them. So they're taking the fight asymmetrically to the United States, while the United States plays whack-a-mole. And intentionally so on Iran's part. Hey, we'll pop up here, we'll pop up there, whether it's the Houthis, whether it's Hamas, whether it's Hezbollah yet to be, or as we've just seen, Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, that conducted these strikes against Tower 22 in Jordan. And so from our viewpoint, the U.S. has to address these active attacks with its own forward-thinking answers, responses to it. We're just not seeing that. The U.S. wants to de-escalate this. And what John and I are arguing, ironically, is to kind of take a page from the Gerasimov doctrine, saying, you know what, maybe Russia's right in this little narrow area, that we need to escalate to send a message to Iran. We're not going to tolerate this anymore. You're not going to be killing U.S. soldiers. We're not going to hit your proxies. We're going to hit you directly.
Well, the way of thinking, at least the way I understand is that the U.S. does not, or the decision makers do not want to hit the Revolutionary Guard's headquarters or camps or bases inside Iran, not to provoke an attack of Iran against United States troops. But what's the difference? I mean, what is the difference between people who are controlled and groups that are controlled by Iran hitting U.S. targets in the Middle East and Iran directly hitting U.S. targets as a response to potential airstrikes or other kind of measures that U.S. would take in answer to those Tower 22 attacks or other attacks that we witnessed over the span of last week?
Right. It's a great question. It's a maddening question because clearly there really isn't a difference. The only difference is in how we respond. And I would even argue, I'm not even sure we're ready to take on the RGC itself inside of Iraq or Syria. I mean, basically, when you give your enemies 6 days to know you're coming, and you basically piecemeal the information out. B-1s are in the air. You know, that whole 12 hours leading up to the actual strikes themselves. You know, Iran not only had 12 hours, they had 6 days to say to their, militia groups there, get out of Dodge. And that's exactly what they did. So the U.S. hit a lot of empty buildings. And yes, they hit control centers, weapons depots, drone assembly sites, and the like. But, you know, those are all things that can easily be replicated, reproduced, and put back into place in no time at all. We've seen Hamas do that time and time again in the Gaza Strip. So from our standpoint, you know, they're just not willing to do it. And I think, you know, personally, this is just my personal opinion, I think the administration may be suffering a little bit from the smartest guys in the room syndrome. I think they believe they can strike a deal with Iran. They still believe that is back in the early days of the Obama administration when the calculus was made by Jake Sullivan, who was a key advisor to Obama back then and now the national security advisor, that Iran somehow, we can negotiate with them. John Kerry, the former Secretary of State under Obama, he too, close relationship with the then foreign minister of Iran. And I think they believe there's something to be had there, but the reality is there isn't. And I think what they're missing, the reason why they can't move past that into realizing that Iran itself needs to pay a price. And we're not talking about going to war with Iran with the full force and might of the U.S. military. We're talking about key strikes there, is because they think there's this deal. But the problem is Ukraine has happened. Russia needs Iran as a partner. Russia's calculus with what it needs Iran to be doing for its behalf against the U.S. has changed. And so Iran has gone down a very different path than the one they thought they saw. And until they wake up to that, until they stop being the smartest men in the room and start saying, hey, things have changed, I think we're still going to see this kabuki theater play out.
Actually, the thing that comes to my mind when I'm witnessing the whole, well, you are using in your article those words, a kind of theater of this kind, is that some time ago, if someone asked me or projected me this kind of reality, I don't know, half a year ago, that let's call it terrorist group controlled obviously by Iran would strike American base on territory of Jordan out of all countries in the Middle East, and that the U.S. wouldn't be able or wouldn't want to answer directly, I wouldn't believe it. But first of all, I wouldn't believe that this kind of thing would happen. It is quite unthinkable for a militia or a proxy group to attack directly with a drone a U.S. Base. We've seen terrorist attacks against U.S. bases in Middle East. We've seen, well, many people died. We've got the memory of the terrorist attacks in the places where American soldiers were stationed. We've seen attacks on barracks of U.S. troops. People died there. But this is a kind of direct military attack against U.S. military base. It looks like something different from the things that we've seen in the past in the Middle East.
It is different. I mean, Iran clearly is escalating. I mean, they've called and John and I wrote about this before in a previous article. They've called their approach to these militia groups as an axis of resistance. And John and I have made the argument that, in effect, they become an axis of escalation on behalf of Iran, with Russia behind the scenes in terms of the machinations making that happen. And so this clearly, the Houthi attacks, the targeting of U.S. naval vessels and commercial shipping in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, as well as now the active targeting of U.S. bases, which has been going on. I mean, since October 5th, I'm losing track. There's 150 plus attacks that occurred just in Syria and Iraq alone from Iranian-backed militias. And so this has been increasing, and it was just a matter of time. And I believe it was back in November, John and I wrote another article saying, when is a U.S. soldier going to die before Biden wakes up to the fact that this policy is just, of doing nothing, of not making Iran and the RGC pay a price inside of Iran, When is he going to wake up to the fact this is eventually is going to cost U.S. soldiers their lives? And on January 28th, it did 3 more. And so far, from our perspective, what we're seeing, I fear more American soldier lives are going to be at risk and probably will die. And that, Michael, is before we even get into some of what the purpose of this smokescreen is for Iran to keep developing its nuclear program. I mean, there's more to this picture than just these attacks.
That's the elephant in the room. This is a big talking point of international politics. This is a big talking point of countless operations that Israel as a state conducted against Iran. Countless secret services operations that are even known publicly. Many people died inside Iran because of activity. At least that's the way that those things are described. Because of activity of Israeli secret services and people connected to the Iranian nuclear program. The big operation of electronic warfare, the computer viruses were sent all over the world to stop the certain devices that are controlling this process. Yet, Iran is having, or at least it looks like, Iran is in possession of nuclear weapons right now. Or is it not?
Yeah, clearly they're on the cusp of nuclear breakout, if not already there. And by nuclear breakout, as we discussed on your program a while back, we mean that they have the ability to actually enough material, enough mass, enough highly enriched uranium at 90% to produce a bomb in 5 days. Now, delivering it, detonating it is another thing. That could take them another month or 2 months. But basically, they're there. It's just a question of flipping the light switch for the most part.
So maybe that's the reason why U.S. is not so keen on attacking Iran directly. Maybe they treat it as a kind of a provocation.
Yeah, it's possible, but if we take the president at his word, Biden has said under no circumstances will he allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. So, if I'm going to hold him to his word, which I will, I mean, he's the one that set that policy. I agree with it. Iran shouldn't have a nuclear weapon. Then it's incumbent upon him to act. And I think what we're just seeing is that in their minds, they've taken this mindset that, yes, Iran via Russia is trying to go to send a response. But at some point, the response is still needed. And it's needed to send messages on multiple levels that you cannot kill U.S. soldiers, that you cannot kill, that you cannot continue this pursuit of nuclear weapons. Because if we think Iran is bad now with a forward-active defense, they're going to be almost unmanageable if they've got access to nuclear weapons. And so a good friend of John and mine that previously had worked with John in the intel world, Michael Pregent, has said, we've got to transcend from hitting these empty buildings and hitting sand and starting to go after targets that make Iran feel pain. And one of those, he's standing around. He's in Iran. We need a repeat of a Soleimani. We need to take out Ismail Qayyani, who's the current head of the IRGC. He's behind all of this. He's the one coordinating with this. He's popping up in Lebanon and Syria and the like, and as well as in Iraq. We need to take out his number 2 guy, who in many cases, Mike Pregent in particular, is called the de facto prime minister of Iraq, a man by the name of Abu Fadak. Abu Fadak was there walking, available. He was a target of opportunity days ago in Iraq. And yet, since these attacks occurred, and yet the U.S. is letting him walk scot-free. It makes no sense. He's the guy that should be taken out. Iran has intelligence ships, the Basad and Saviz, and our good friend, our mutual friend Chuck Farr could speak far better to that. But those targets are ones that the U.S. could send a signal to. And then, yes, we could be hitting Natanz and Fordoz, the nuclear centrifuge production facilities of Iran, to send a message just saying, enough. We get it. You're at war with us, and if you really want to go to war with us, this is what war is going to look like to you. Until they see that, until they see that the U.S. is actually willing to fight back, I think we just see a lot more of the same, Michael. And in the meantime, that nuclear program keeps walking closer and closer to being able to deliver those bombs.
So the price that Iran, or actually their proxies, paid for this attack, for that of those 3 U.S. servicemen is low? It's cheap?
It's basically nothing. I mean, they didn't die. IRGC people didn't die. maybe some of their contacts, maybe the watchman died, but the key command and control people were gone. The weapons are easily replaced. The logistics can be reestablished. And again, and I'm repeating myself now in this interview, Iran has shown through Hamas they're capable of doing that. Hamas is still firing rockets into central Israel from places in the Gaza Strip, and we're several months into that war, 3 months into that war, and so one-day strike on 85 sites, taking out some drones and stockpiles, is not going to accomplish a whole lot. Israel probably in the first hours, if I could finish, if Israel probably in the first hour of its invasion of Gaza flew more sorties than the U.S. did, in responding last week. So sorry to interrupt you.
No, well, actually, those numbers are staggering in the context that you just mentioned. You actually point to the way that Israel treats the individuals who are responsible for attacks against Israel. No big discussions ahead of attack, and no comments after this kind of attacks. And you are mentioning in your text one of these events that happened days ago, actually.
Yeah, it was a very interesting event, Michael. I'm glad you brought it up, because Israel has shown that it is willing to take out its enemies when and where they appear on the battlefield. And the individual you're referring to and that we referenced in our article is Saeed al-Adadi, who was a IRGC commander in Syria. And it was interesting because at first, when Israel took them out with a drone strike, everyone thought, that was the start of the U.S. response. It happened the same day. So you've got U.S. airsets in the air, B-1 bombers, literally probably flying from my own state where I'm speaking from. I don't know that for a fact, but they are based here as well. Flying all the way to that, Israel still said, you know what, we realize the U.S. is attacking. I'm sure there was coordination there because of the airspace in Syria and the like, not to cause any friendly fire between U.S. and Israeli Air Force and stuff. Nonetheless, they took the opportunity and they took this man out. So those first reports that everyone jumped on, like the U.S. responses started, was actually an Israeli strike. And it wasn't coordinated. I know a lot of people, I got private messages, is Israel joining in? No. Israel wants to continue to act independently. They take great pride in that. And they were willing to take someone off the battlefield. The U.S. to date, since Soleimani, has not proven the same resolve. And I think that's telling. And until we do, we're not going to change much of this equation in the Mideast at any level, not at the tactical level of U.S. troops being attacked, not at the strategic level of Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons.
The big elephant in the room, another elephant in the same room, is Russia. Russia, which plays the game and uses the Middle East conflict to actually capitalize during their attack against Ukraine. But the situation over there on the front lines of the Russian war in Ukraine does not seem to be changing a lot. What is the influence? Is there any influence on Russian positions, geopolitical, military positions in the war against Ukraine because of the things that are happening in the Middle East right now?
Yeah. Michael, that is a brilliant question, because I think, and as John Sweet, my co-writer, likes to say, he reminds me all the time, reminds a lot of people responding to us, the enemy always gets a vote. So Putin is learning from us, and in turn, Iran has been learning from Putin. And it's been a big lesson that Biden's been teaching them unintentionally. I don't think that's what he meant to do. But he's basically taught that he's taught them, you can take down the United States by creating these forever wars. And so what they're doing with these kinetic actions in Ukraine and just the perpetual belief that they can outlast the U.S., we're now seeing Iran apply that in the Mideast, because Biden, for whatever reason, and again, we've racked our brains to try to come up with the exact reason why, fears escalation. I mean, all of our responses, the way we slow walked equipment into Ukraine, the way we swap capabilities into Ukraine, the way we still haven't provided them with the weaponry needed to conduct an effective combined arms offensive type warfare situation that could penetrate Russian lines. All of those things have had the calculus in their minds of we don't want to escalate the situation. In other words, but it's forever war. You need to win. You can't just keep down this road of letting your enemy attack. You defend. As George Patton said, nobody ever won anything by defending. You have to attack.
Yeah, an old sports saying, and it comes to my mind that you are playing to get a stalemate, you are probably going to lose. That's the way it works on a basketball court and probably in all other sporting disciplines.
Exactly. You know what it's like to let up that pedal. I mean, you've been there. You know what it's like when you start playing defense, all of a sudden those threes start getting hit. And you're like, whoa, where did that 20-point lead go?
That's true. Mark, thank you very much. Thanks again for another brilliant text of the splendid duo of Mark Toth and Jonathan Sweet. We're going to have a chance to talk again pretty soon as new articles of yours show up in the world geopolitical newsfeed. Thanks a lot, Mark. See you soon.
Pleasure to be back. Take care. Pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our Substack. You can leave us your message. We are scanning the global security reports to provide you, at least we try to provide daily reports on the situation regarding the constant attack on the Western civilization, the war that we are trying to report also on our program. We come back tomorrow. See you soon. Ciao, bye-bye, stay safe.